So hello everyone, and very, very welcome to this episode where I'm super, super happy to have Ellen with me. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know you, you're an NP, you work in sleep, and you're in Virginia, correct?
That's right.
And again, I think you've been on before and talked about this, but just briefly, I remember you saying that in your area there was really nobody focused on insomnia, and you decided to get training. Was that how it started?
Yeah, so I have this job in sleep medicine, see a variety of different diagnoses, but I have some with insomnia that I felt would benefit from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia or CBTI. And I started looking around at who in the area does that, and I really didn't find a whole lot. And so I just decided to go ahead and get the training myself so that I would be able to provide that for my patients. And so I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. That's awesome. Cool. So let's get started here. So we have 4 emails of various lengths to talk about. And the first one is from Liz. So I'll read it. And there's a specific question, but there's other things we can talk about too. But let's read it and then we'll go from there. So this came in two days ago. And Liz said, I've never had sleep issues other than when I travel until recently. I'm 8 weeks postpartum, and about 2 weeks ago, I had a week of almost sleepless nights. I think what happened is that my baby started sleeping through the night after he went a few weeks, waking up multiple times a night. And when he started sleeping through the night, I would just lay there awake, tossing and turning with the thought, I need to fall asleep before he wakes up. Then I was even more frustrated because he was soundly sleeping. I was awake all night. I did what you describe in your podcast. I had one night of being able to get back to sleep after feeding him. Then I gave myself anxiety about getting to sleep. And then what followed was about 6 nights of insomnia. I would get so anxious before bed. I did what you advised not to do. I started going to bed earlier, fixating on sleep hygiene, screens, don't eat sugar, no lights, etc. I took Unisom, melatonin, Benadryl, and none of that worked except made me even drowsier the next day. I also had these fears that I would be a bad mom the next day because I was going to be so tired. I was sleeping in late as I would combat the sleeplessness. And I was also taking naps during the day. Anyway, after listening to your podcast, I started doing sleep restriction last Wednesday on the 28th. I had my first night of falling asleep pretty much right away. That was so motivating. I was going to bed at 12, getting up at 7. That first night, I went to sleep at 12 and the baby woke up at 3 to eat. I had a hard time falling back to sleep after, but I got out of bed and watched the show and fell back to sleep. The next 2 nights were great. I did 12 to 7 a few times. Then I crept back the time to 11:30 to 7, and that worked well too. My question is that my 2-month-old son wakes between 5 to 6 to feed, and then I try to go back to sleep. Sometimes I'm successful, but other times I just toss and turn until my alarm at 7. I'm wondering if I should change my wake up time to 5 a.m. If I do this, would it be okay this early in my sleep restriction to change my time going to bed a little earlier in order to accommodate the earlier wake time? So basically we have somebody who's actually started taking action here and it's wondering like, how should she move forward? What are your thoughts,
Okay.
Ellen?
Okay. First of all, I love this scenario because what are we worried about as parents? We're worried about our babies getting the night and the day confused. And she has almost created this situation for herself because of one word that I heard about 4 times in the opening of that email, which was anxiety. I'm afraid that if I don't sleep when my baby sleeps, that I'm going to be a bad mom the next day. I'm not going to be able to function. Whatever that consequence is, it's fear that's driving it, and it's anxiety that's driving it. And that's what's driving the insomnia. That's what's keeping her from being able to go to sleep. That's making her be hyper aroused and vigilant at night, is because she's afraid and she's anxious that these bad things are going to happen if she doesn't sleep. So she's created this pressure for herself. It's like she's got a gun to her head. Like, I have to do this. It's an absolute necessity. And when we get into that situation, that's going to perpetuate the whole process of insomnia. And so she's figured it out already with this sleep restriction. I love that she found you so quickly, that there's resources available, and she was able to like start using it already. It is a very powerful tool, and it sounds like it's already working for her. So that's great. And the other thing I would counsel her to remember is that, you know, and I know, and this was said somewhere recently, it might have been on Twitter, which was basically like every night of sleep is not a masterpiece. Like it's not a piece of, perfection. You're going to have some nights where you're worried about things or you're not sleeping, and just to be able to roll with them and not engage in that panic mode, not let that anxiety sort of get the best of you. But as far as her question as to should she shift her wake up time, I guess my question would be, does she want to get up at that time, like on a regular basis? I think if she doesn't mind early mornings, if that fits her chronotype and she's productive in the morning and she likes being awake early, then sure. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, she could get some things done. If she's not actually sleeping a whole lot in those last couple hours, then there's not really a need to sort of force lying in bed for a couple more hours just to get a few, restless last minutes of sleep. So I would say if that's the case, sure, get up at 5. And yeah, you might have to go to bed a little bit earlier, but I maybe wouldn't at first, or I wouldn't go to bed a whole lot sooner. Just back it up slowly, because otherwise you might have a little problem on the front end falling asleep, because your pattern right now is different. Her pattern right now is to stay up a little bit later. But if she starts getting up at 5 o'clock, by the time she gets 3 or 4 days into that, she will be sleepier in the evening more than likely. And so it probably won't be an issue.
Exactly. Thanks so much for all those insights. And my thinking when I heard this was very similar, meaning like, I don't think it matters so much if she chooses to do 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. I think the important point in the beginning is like, pick one and then kind of go with that one. Don't try to keep it too much, right? Let at least like 2 weeks go. And I think what I felt so encouraging with this email, I was so happy when I read it, was like, this is somebody that hasn't had trouble for that long. This is somebody who has early success. This is somebody who is like, if Liz, if you just like pick 5 or pick 7 and then just stick with it, then your sleep confidence will start to grow. And then you won't even have these type of questions going forward, right?
I know. And I that's what was encouraging to me too, is that she was able to kind of get help early on so that it didn't become a chronic issue. She's already intervening and making these changes and having success with it. But I agree with you. I don't think the time really matters. Do what makes sense for your schedule. And the other thing is with baby sleep, their sleep's not going to be, yes, with babies, we aim for certain ranges or certain patterns or certain numbers of nap a day, but they're going to change a lot too. So as her baby grows in the next year, it's not always going to be a perfect set pattern that you can predict. I remember looking at if my baby fell asleep at a nap time that maybe wasn't their typical nap time, I would think, okay, what do I do? Do I try to get some stuff done? Do I try to close my eyes? And I would look at them, and to me, I could just hear this like tick, 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 like it was a little time bomb, and it could go off at any point. And I wouldn't be able to predict whether it was going to be 10 minutes for now or whether that baby was going to sleep for 45 minutes. And so it is really hard as a parent, because you don't know and you can't plan. And so you have to just pick something and roll with it.
That is so funny you mentioned that, because that just took me back to that time too, and all these calculations. Oh my gosh, she had a nap 1 hour before. Should I wake her up earlier or allow her to sleep a little longer? It's oh my gosh, this is such a superpower. And I want to sneak one more in there, which I think Michael Schwartz told me something that I felt was really important one time. He said, like, we don't expect our days to be identical. We don't expect,
right?
So why should we expect our nights to be almost identical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very cool. I think there might have been actually one more. I think I just want to comment here. Liz said that she says, oh, I might have done a mistake of being too confident early on, and I started going to bed, half an hour too early. And I just want to comment on that, Liz, that I think, again, what we talked about is like, kind of set it and forget it. Decide like, I'm going to get up this time, and then bedtime is probably going to fall into place, and just kind of go with it, keep going with it. Don't question it. And you'll do really, really well. So that said, let's move over to our next, question here, and this is from Kamal, who in fact had a question in the past about hypnic jerks. And I did this, sometimes I don't know, but based on the name, if it's a male or female, and I assumed it was a male. I was wrong, as always. Kamal is a female, now we know that. Anyway, let's read these questions. And she says, hi, Daniel, I watched your videos and found them really helpful. I have two new questions. Number one, my sleep is fragmented and I'm very aware of my awakenings. I find that I dream a lot, especially after a couple hours of sleep until morning. My dreams feel really very real. And when I awaken throughout the night, I'm very aware of them. Sometimes I can fall back asleep and continue my dream, which feels so weird. Is it normal to have so many dreams and to fall back into them? Sometimes I feel like I'm slightly awake when I dream. What do you make of this, Ellen?
Well, it could be completely normal, but I would say to see a sleep specialist, particularly if she is having any problems with daytime sleepiness, because what she's describing can also be a symptom of narcolepsy. I know that's kind of like going straight to someplace kind of bigger, but disturbed nighttime sleep is very common in narcolepsy because you have wake protruding on your sleep as well as sleep intruding on your wake cycle during the day. So people will think, well, I can't have narcolepsy because I kind of have this disturbed nighttime sleep. Well, that's a symptom of narcolepsy. So because that sleep-wake stabilization is just not there and it's kind of toggling back and forth. And another symptom of narcolepsy is really vivid dreaming and having a hard time differentiating it from reality. Now, I don't know if what she's experiencing is to that extent. Certainly people in the normal population who don't have narcolepsy can have a lot of the things that we associate with narcolepsy, like the sleep paralysis can happen, like 7 to 14%, I think, of the normal population outside of narcolepsy. So these things happen sort of routinely, but I would say if she's having other symptoms, particularly daytime sleepiness, it might just be time for an evaluation with a sleep specialist. She could also be having something like periodic limb movements that are sort of arousing her, twitching her awake. And usually usually when you dream, when you come out of your dream, you kind of pass through light sleep before you have an arousal. And going through that doorway of light sleep helps you to not remember your dream because you're not transitioning straight up to wake. When you have something going on with your sleep, either sleep apnea or periodic limb movement or something else that's jolting you out of your dreams, sometimes you'll remember them more. So if it's a change in dream pattern, sometimes that's a clue to us as sleep specialists that maybe there's something going on with sleep that we need to take a look at. So a sleep specialist that can do a thorough history and really decide whether a sleep study is appropriate might be a good next step for her.
I love it. I love how you answer that question. Very, very nice, thorough answer. And it's so important to have a guest like you because you think in a kind of a different pattern than I'm so hyper, like I'm so in the insomnia world that all I think is like, this is all insomnia, and then I'm adding my 2 cents here, like, which it could be also, like it could
Yeah.
all be hyper arousal, right? It could
Sure.
all
Yeah.
be that you're kind of anxious, you're stressed, and you never get into deep sleep, and you kind of fluctuate between inside, kind of superficial sleep, deep sleep, or superficial sleep, wakefulness. You're completely aware of what's going on. It creates these vivid dreams. So I want to say, always when you're worried about your health, talk to a sleep specialist or your doctor. But I think it could also all be hyperarousal. So that was question number 1 from Kamal. And by the way, if you feel, Kamal, that you're going to talk to a doctor or you may feel like that's not necessary, whatnot, you can always try. I in my opinion, it's never wrong to try spending less time in bed and see if you get deeper sleep. Which actually, as I'm saying that, this next question kind of I don't need to say more because it comes to the next question here. So the next question is, I'm having difficult finding recommendations on whether sleep restriction is good for people who are struggling with cortisol and adrenal issues. Could a tight sleep window cause more stress to the body, making these issues worse? I'm slowly doing everything you talk about on your channel, except for that tight sleep window. I've kept my sleep window for 8 hours instead of 6. So I guess the question for Kamal is like, what are your thoughts? Yeah, Ellen,
I'm shaking my head because I think she needs to do the tight sleep window. I think there's no, like you said, there's no reason not to try it. As far as the cortisol, the stress and anxiety you have when you're Googling and trying to figure out that, if you're going to, is causing you more cortisol secretion than doing the sleep window. And if you're getting more consolidated, deeper sleep, your cortisol levels are going to be better. So I think that it's time. She needs to bite the bullet and go into the sleep restriction boot camp, because it kind of is. It takes a lot of dedication, and it's not always fun, but you're going to see progress, because it's biologically, it builds such a strong sleep drive that it's a very powerful tool. And there's no, if you're trying everything else, it's time to try that, because that's probably your best thing you've got in your toolbox anyway.
100% agree. Absolutely agree. No real comments on that one, except kind of a follow-up question, which is, I think the most, probably the most common reason people don't want to like spend time in bed is kind of the fear of losing more sleep. I'm going to spend less time in bed, I'm going to lose sleep because of that. What is your take on that kind of common fear?
Well, I mean, there's a possibility that might happen in the short term, but in the long term, it's just like anything else. I mean, these are learned behaviors and they are modifiable things, and so we just have to just think of it as training. Just like when you're learning something new, like a new swim stroke or something. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, it's going to be hard to, maybe you're not going to be as good at the butterfly as you are at the freestyle, but if you keep practicing it, you're going to get better. And so it's just a matter of, going through that rough patch of doing it. But the long-term benefits are going to be so much better that it's worth any short-term loss of sleep that you might experience. But in my experience, it doesn't take long for that sleep to get consolidated. Your brain learns very quickly that, okay, she's getting up at 6 a.m. and she is not letting me go to bed until, 1 in the morning or midnight. And so it learns very quickly, I got to get down to it. I've got to really, and what it does is it builds that really strong association of the bed with sleep too, which is what we want. We don't want to lounge around and hang out in bed all day where we're doing 100 other things. We want to do those other things, live our life, have fun, not in, outside of the bed. And then when we're really sleepy, then we get in the bed and our brain goes right to sleep and does what it needs to do in bed. And by right to sleep, I still want people to understand that realistically, we're talking 85%. We're not, it would be unusual to fall asleep immediately. I mean, at 15, even up to 30 minutes, you shouldn't be stressed about. You shouldn't be stressed about any of it, but particularly that would not be abnormal. But yeah, I think that, I'm totally lost my train of thought.
No, you made a great case. That's funny.
Up until the end, and then I was like, "Wait, what are we?" Squirrel,
Oh my god, that was so much fun.
What was the question again?
Exactly, right. I saw you were looking for like, where am I going? Like, how should I end this? And what was the question?
Yeah.
But you answered it and more. I mean, that was a great case for like why spending less time in bed is so important.
It's sort of short term, long term. I think you shouldn't be afraid of losing sleep temporarily, because eventually your sleep's gonna be so much better. It's just gonna be so much better. And as your brain learns that, you're going to be able to spend a little bit more time in bed once you figure that out. But short term, I think it's such a powerful tool. We shouldn't be afraid to use it.
100%. I think, I don't know if you've heard this analogy, but I use it sometimes. The one where you talk about like playing chess, and you have to sacrifice a pawn to win the game. But that's kind of illustrates it too, right?
I'm so embarrassed you brought up that, because we had this chess game sitting out on the table, and I said, I don't really remember all the rules. I don't really play chess, but my daughter and my husband were playing. And so then one day my son was like, okay, mom, let's go. And you basically make your move, and then you just flip over the card that says it's the other person's turn, so that every time you walk through the dining room, or you can, do your turn, and then the next person will come through. And he beat me in 4 moves.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah. It's pretty
Wow.
bad.
Hey, by the way,
I need to work on my chess game.
as we move to, we have 2 more questions, and they're briefer questions, but are you familiar at all with like SFI, sporadic fatal insomnia?
With what?
SFI, or sporadic fatal insomnia.
Oh, yes, unfortunately I am.
So you do get questions about that sometimes?
I don't. I haven't had a patient come in worried about it, but I'm sure I will someday. And I know it exists. And I do think that it scares people,
Yeah.
which it shouldn't, because it's so rare, and it's not really a sleep disorder. It's more a neurodegeneration, wouldn't you say, or that it would fall into more that category.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so happy you said that. That's exactly how I feel about it. It was just somebody in some point of history made that unfortunate decision to call it insomnia. It should have been called like sporadic fatal neurodegenerative disease or something like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, I've never had anybody in clinic ask me about this, but in the YouTube channel, it's actually one of the most common questions, So anyway, that's
really. Have you ever heard of brain amoebas? Like that you go in some water and you accidentally get some water up your nose, and there's amoebas in there, and they attack your brain. And have you heard of them?
No, I've never ever heard of that.
Okay, well, they're a thing, and my husband knows they scare the crap out of me, even though they're super, super rare, and they hardly happen to anybody. But anytime he sees a news article about it, he sends it to me. Just to sort of be like, see, someone else, brain amoeba. And that's what I think of when I think of, like, it's so rare, it's not going to happen to you. And the fact that, you're afraid of it is just, it's unreasonable, unrealistic. It's silly. And all that fear is what will drive the insomnia. It's not that you have a neurodegenerative disorder. It's that, is that you're just afraid you do.
Exactly. Well, so much to talk about. Let's get to this. Let's get to this question here. So this is from Jake, and he wrote to us 2 days ago. He said this, like, "Hi Daniel, I saw your video. I guess it was on SFI. I was certainly worried about the disease, even though I know it's rare, and your video eased my worry. This said, I've been one of the people you brought up in your video that is worried about the astronomically unlikely chance of acquiring fatal insomnia, the sporadic version. You mentioned that insomnia is actually not a common complaint in people with these conditions, and that other neurological symptoms are usually what is causing the disease. That's the biggest issues. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a tad more on other symptoms, if you know anything about the timing of onset. You mentioned symptoms like coordination loss, cognitive decline, blood pressure, and body temperature spikes. In the case of FFI versus SFI, would all these symptoms become noticeable to the diseased person or people around them before insomnia even becomes an issue? For example, if someone were to be at the very first stages of this disease, would they notice some of these other symptoms before the insomnia really starts kicking in? And so there's one more brief follow-up question, but I can start answering this one, and then I have some thoughts that I want to talk to you about, Ellen. But here's my understanding. But first of all, I've only read like case reports on this. It is so extremely rare. But what I think is really, really important is that insomnia is subjective. Insomnia is when somebody struggles to sleep, like is anxious about sleep, like just can't sleep, like doing things to fall asleep, which is very different from, when you see somebody, which I've seen a lot, people with Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease in kind of the early stages, there's no anxiety there. They oftentimes, it's the complete opposite. They have this like this tremor. It's super obvious that they have this tremor, but they don't want to think about it. They don't want to acknowledge it because they know it's there, it's real. And so when you read these case reports on fatal insomnias, it's described as like these people have neurological symptoms. They start being unable to walk, unable to talk, unable to coordinate. And there's no report whatsoever of like insomnia, as in like, I'm worried about my sleep. They were trying these things to sleep. It's just matter-of-factly described as they started sleeping less and less. So to me, when somebody is really, really, really worried about their sleep, that in itself it's very much a sign that it's not a neurodegenerative condition. It is what we call insomnia. And just to kind of briefly answer your question, what I understand from the literature is that the FFI, then you often have that kind of like less sleep, not necessarily insomnia, but kind of just objectively less sleep pretty early. With the SFI, it happens later, but it's super, super rare. But anyway, so with that said, I feel like the big thing here, that the reason I have so many questions, I think, about SFI is that it's this ambiguity. Like, could I have it or do I not have it? How can I find out? And people find evidence. Is this a sign that I have it? Is this a sign that I don't have it? And so my kind of more general question to you, Ellen, here is like, and that we see that a lot with insomnia, the kind of ambiguity. Could it be this? Could it be that? What if it's this? What if it's that? What are your thoughts on like, how can you get past kind of uncertainty and ambiguity and like wondering what if?
You're much, I think, kinder than I am about it, because it's hard. It's a hard question to answer. I want to have a gentle spirit and a kindness about it, but I also want to say, stop Googling this stuff, like it's just not worth your time to go down these rabbit holes of every little twitch or tingle or pinprick feeling, or I mean, I could sit there and look up the symptoms of ALS, and I could probably convince myself I have a bunch of them, and ALS is pretty devastating. And but that wouldn't be living my life. I think with any of these neurodegenerative type diseases, no matter how much you pay attention to it, it's going to be clear eventually if you have it. I mean, so why waste the time when you're functioning well and you could be living your life? Why waste it paying every little attention to every little change in your body, every little muscle twitch, every little, like you said, the people with Parkinson's that clearly have the tremor and they're not, it's like they don't want to acknowledge it. Well, in a way, why should they? Because they probably know in the back of their mind what's going on, and they just want to enjoy their life without thinking about it now, until it becomes a big enough issue that that's all that they can do is to be dealing with it. Right now, if there's just little things that you're concerned about, they're just little things. So let them just be that, and try to find other things in your life to distract you from worrying and being anxious over, something that is very unlikely that you have. And, somebody told me once, don't worry until there's actually something to worry about. And I think with these neurodegenerative diseases, it'll become very clear if that's the problem. Either you're going to continue to have these little symptoms that really amount to nothing. There's lots of little symptoms that in the neurology world never materialize into anything. Patients will come with a list of, well, when I do this, this happens, and if I, and they never materialize into anything most of the time. And if they were to, we would know, because it would become very quickly go downhill. And so until there's something to worry about, I think your focus is better put on the things in your life that make you happy and the things in your life that fulfill you, and not paying attention to every little change in your body or symptom that you think might be a disease.
100%. Such a great answer. And it's just like what you're saying here is like, by the way, one thing that I never forgot you told me was something in your life has to be bigger than your insomnia. Which I just want to mention that. I never forgot that. Was such a good insight. But taking it to this situation, I feel like if you just if it's just two scenarios, either you just have kind of like ordinary insomnia, or you have this extremely rare condition. Well, if you focus on like just being happy, do things you enjoy, guess what? It's going to be great if you have like regular insomnia. And if you have a neurodegenerative disorder that's going to debilitate you in like a year, even more reason to just enjoy this time when you're doing great, right? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So clear. And the whole piece about something in your life has to be bigger than your insomnia. I do love that thought. And I think that what people do when they're struggling with insomnia sometimes is they shrink their lives in order to like, they shrink their lives because they're so afraid that all of these things that they do during the day are going to affect their sleep, that their lives become smaller and smaller and smaller. And that just gives insomnia more room to grow. So you have to make your life bigger, more fulfilled, more, and then the insomnia gets crowded out by your big, fulfilled, happy life.
Love it. Absolutely love that. Thanks so much for sharing this one. And I can answer this quick kind of follow-up question, which is, can you be tested for SFI? Here's the thing, my understanding is that, MRIs, sleep studies are actually not helpful. They're not diagnostic. But what I have, so you can check this out, Jake, on episode, Insomnia Insight episode 284, there's a comment from Chad Highfill, something like that, where he describes how you can kind of run your own genome and actually kind of tell if you have this or not. And the person who wrote that comment is actually coming on as a guest, and he'll tell us more about it. Not that I recommend everybody at all to do that, but I feel sometimes that just knowing that there is a way to find out, maybe that in itself can really be reassuring. So with that said, last question is from Alex. And so I'm sure you have heard this in clinic or where are these like events that happen, Ellen, where somebody's kind of like about to fall asleep and then suddenly becomes aware of that and kind of jolts awake. So the question from Alex is the following. I just wanted to know whether or not it was true, which I have said before. I just want to know if it was true that by not interfering with them, you would get past this sudden awareness when they happen, and then you would transition into sleep. Is that true?
I think it's true. I mean, maybe not always, because maybe your brain sort of activates enough but eventually you'll settle back down. But I think I remember being told this when I was in labor, and it was basically, when you have the contraction, you have two choices. You can fight against it, or you can kind of embrace it and live with it. And you're going to get to the other, it's going to pass in a minute or so regardless. But think about it as an ocean. When the wave comes, if you try to fight against that wave, it's going to knock you over. If you just lift your feet up and let it kind of wash past you, it's going to be a lot easier. So it's kind of this notion of recognize that what you're experiencing is normal, but live in it, live in the moment of it, just let it wash over you, and know that you'll come out the other side one way or the other, and that paying more attention to it, if your brain gets activated, that's okay. You can recalm down in a minute, but it's if you are able to just kind of be aware of it, but stay calm and understand that that's a natural thing that happens, you'll likely fall asleep. It happened to me last night, and I thought, oh, I'm having this awareness, and then I thought, but that's okay, and then I don't remember anything else. So I guess I did fall asleep. So I know it's possible. I just think it probably takes practice, or some nights are going to be different than others. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think you brought some good points here, which is, I've talked about how if you the worst thing to do, I feel, is like when people pay a lot of attention to them, try to figure them out, and also try to prevent them, try to do this for them not to happen, or do this, because then they get more attention, they happen more often. So if you try not to do anything, you're much more likely to fall asleep. But you may not, and that's not a big deal. But if you just,
Yeah.
one time you may not fall asleep, and if you just don't react to that either, like eventually you'll do really, really well. So 100% agree with that one. Very, very good.
I think of the sort of mindfulness piece where when you're sort of practicing mindfulness or meditation, and the thoughts are going to be there, and the goal isn't always to make it blank. It's just that when the thought comes, to kind of accept it and then let it pass through, instead of dwelling on it, ruminating on it. But there's still okay, I'm having this thought, and then just kind of let it go. Versus I can't think about anything. That's not really what you're supposed to be doing in meditation, is making everything black. It just has to be black. There has to be nothing there. It has to be completely clear. Well, as soon as you try to do that, your brain's going to start going crazy. And it's kind of like that with insomnia, I think, because we're trying to like calm everything down. And then of course, everything kind of gets riled up. And so it's that piece where the thoughts are going to come, let them come. It's okay. Just have an acceptance of it, and then let them move out.
100%. It's awesome. I want to say thanks so much for joining, Ellen. There was one other thing, like, we talked about that, something has to be bigger in your life than insomnia. There was another thing you had said, or that I thought I was going to ask you about, but I forget that. So I have to ask you to come back another time.
It'll be next time. Yeah, it'll be next time. Yeah.
All right. So again, thanks so much, Ellen. And you take care now.